Hello everyone and welcome back. In today's video we've got a couple of signings to discuss, plus a significant trade between the Habs and the Avs, and we'll get to all of that coming up right now. Hello everyone and welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. I'll kick things off today with two signings that have happened recently. First, as we talked about in our last video, Nick Foligno's signing rights were acquired by the Chicago Blackhawks in the Taylor Hall deal. And Foligno was a pending UFA. There was a lot of speculation as to whether he would sign or not, and he has indeed signed. A decent signing. The Hawks have signed him to a one-year contract extension that'll have an average annual value of $4 million, and they'll begin at the start of next year. Now, for Nick Foligno, he's been playing with the Bruins the past couple of years. He hasn't done fantastic. The first year was definitely not really good for Foligno, only putting up 2 goals and 13 points in 64 NHL games, so it wasn't really great for him. He definitely looked like he was going down in value, but he was able to bounce back last year. He definitely did really good, putting up 10 goals and 26 points in 60 games. So in 4 less games, he was able to double his point total. So Foligno definitely did really good last year. The Hawks don't really have as much established forwards. So where Foligno was a fourth line forward in Boston, I think he'd definitely be a third line forward in Chicago, with the Hawks not having as much offensive depth. So definitely, I think this is a solid move for the Hawks. Foligno's very versatile. He can play center or wing, so he can definitely play in a variety of different situations. And on top of that, he is a very good veteran who brings a lot of experience to the roster. And for a very, very young Hawks team, I think that could be very beneficial to guys like the young players like Kurashev or Radish, or even a young guy like Connor Bedard, who they most likely will draft first overall tomorrow. So definitely, this is a solid signing for the Hawks, and I think even though it's a little bit expensive, I don't think anyone else would have ever paid Foligno $4 million in free agency. They can retain 50% and move him at the trade line for like $2 million, and I think there will be definitely some teams who would definitely be interested in that. So definitely an interesting signing, but I do like this move for the Hawks to get some experience in their team, another solid NHL forward, and a player who they can maybe move at the trade line. So definitely, I think this is a really good signing for both the Hawks and Foligno, as I don't think Foligno is going to get anywhere near this sort of money on the free agent market. As for the other signing, the Nashville Predators have signed young defenseman Jake Livingstone to a 2-year contract extension that will have an average annual value of $775,000, and they'll begin at the start of next year. Now, Livingston was a player who was playing in college over the past couple of years, put up 9 goals and 31 points in 44 games 2 years ago, but definitely did a much improvement this year, putting up 8 goals and 35 points in 39 games. Would sign a 1-year deal late in the season with the Nashville Predators to finish up his season there. He put up an assist in 5 NHL games, and was then an RFA at the end of the year. So he was an RFA. The Preds were able to sign him to a small, not too expensive 2-year league minimum deal at $775,000. So it's not overly bad. Depending on what the Preds do with their defense this offseason, I could see maybe Livingstone being a solid, maybe third pair defenseman next year for the Preds. He's not going to be a great offensive defenseman, but I think he could be a solid third pair defenseman. It also wouldn't surprise me if he started the year in the AHL and continued to develop. So definitely don't know exactly where Livingstone's going to start, but he did have a good showing towards the end of the season at the NHL level. So a solid signing for both sides. Livingstone's going to be with the Preds for the next 2 years, and the Preds get some more defensive depth. A good defensive prospect who could be a good defenseman, third pair player in the not too distant future. So good signing there for Nashville, and also good signing for Chicago. So some pretty good signings there. And then we'll go over here to the big trade that happened just a little while ago, and that is that the Montreal Canadiens have acquired forward Alex Newhook from the Colorado Avalanche in exchange for Giovanni Fairbrother, the 31st and the 37th overall pick in this upcoming draft. Now, the 31st overall pick was actually the Florida Panthers pick that they acquired in the Ben Sherratt trade. So it was the Panthers pick. It was a very late first rounder. And then they also moved their own second round pick as well. So this is a decent trade and a surprising trade in my opinion. I was not expecting Newhook to be moved by the Colorado Avalanche. I know he had some pretty bad seasons the past couple of seasons. He was not able to step into that second line center role with the Avalanche last year when Kadri left. I know that he was mostly a third or fourth line forward, but he still has some amazing NHL potential. And I thought that if he can continue to develop, maybe at some point he could still be the Avalanche's second line center. But I'm quite surprised that the Avalanche have moved on from him now. So for the Canadiens, there's a lot of talk they were going after Pierre-Luc Dubois. There's a lot of talk right now that he's going to the LA Kings. So they turn away from going after Dubois and they go after Newhook. Now Newhook's very, very young. He's not overly old. He's only 22 years old. He's coming off his entry-level contract and does need a new deal for this year. So the Montreal Canadiens will have to work something out with him. But this is sort of like the deal they pulled last year at the draft when they acquired Kirby Dach. They moved Romanov to the Islanders for their first-round pick and traded that first-round pick to the Hawks for Kirby Dach. And Dach was a solid young player who the Hawks were willing to trade, and he's fitting really well with the Montreal Canadiens. And I think this is the sort of thing that Montreal really wants. I think maybe next year Newhook could be like the third-line center in Montreal. He's not an overly established forward at this point in time, so move him at the third line center, let him continue to develop. Eventually, maybe they could have a 1-2 punch of Suzuki and Newhook in the center spot. So I definitely think this is a solid move for the Canadiens. They have a ton of draft picks. They have a ton of prospects. So I don't think it's too surprising that they moved those guys. Newhook's a good, solid young player. My guess would be he probably signs like a 2 to 3 year deal that has an AAV of around $3 to $4 million. That'll be my guess. But Newhook's a solid middle six center at the very least at this point in time, who I think could eventually be a solid second-line center. So I think this is a really good move for Montreal. Like I said, Newhook was mostly a third or fourth-line forward in Colorado last year, mostly a third-line forward the year before, so he hasn't been able to really establish himself as a solid top-9 option. And I think with the Montreal Canadiens, he could have the opportunity. So this is a really good move. I am a little bit surprised that the Avalanche were willing to move Newhook at this point in time, but they were willing to, and I think Montreal benefits immensely at this point. Now, for the Avalanche, they also don't have too much cap space, so that could have been another reason that they wound up moving him. He is an RFA, so he does need a new contract. But I do think that with this move, the Avalanche could go in a number of different directions. Newhook, I thought, could be a good bomb six forward at the very least for the Avalanche next year. So I definitely think they could be looking for a couple more top 9 forwards to be adding. We know that they acquired Ryan Johansson to be their second line center just a couple of days ago. So I could see him maybe add like another top 6 winger to sort of help them round out that team. But I definitely like the return they were able to get. Newhook was a first-round pick back in 2018, if I'm correct. He was either 18th or 19th overall, sort of the late teens, early 20s that he was drafted. They get a haul in return for him. So Fairbrother is a solid defensive prospect. I'm pretty sure he was taken in the 2019 draft in the 3rd round from the Montreal Canadiens. And with the Canadiens already having so many good defensive prospects ahead of him, they would be willing to move a guy like Fairbrother in a trade like this to get a good young center in Alex Newhook. So I think this is a really good move for the Habs. The Avalanche, Fairbrother's a solid defensive prospect. He had some pretty good time in the AHL last year, putting up 8 points in 25 games, but I think he'll get a ton more opportunity with Colorado. Now, the Avalanche are sort of like the Sabres, where they have a really, really solid defensive game at the NHL level, but they're a little bit lacking in the depth. So I think Fairbrother could step into the AHL next year, be a solid defensive prospect there, and then maybe in a year or two's time could be a solid third-pair defenseman. I think eventually Fairbrother has the potential to be a third-pair defenseman at the NHL level. So I think this is a really good move for the Avalanche. I think this is a really good grab in Fairbrother. They also get a very late first-round pick, which gives them now 2 first-round picks in tomorrow's NHL draft. They also have the 24th overall pick, and now they have the 31st overall pick. So that's pretty good for them. And now they're also adding the 37th overall pick, which is 5 picks into round 2. So definitely it's an interesting trade. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. Which team do you think wins this trade? In my opinion, given the fact Newhook's a solid prospect right now, who still has some solid maybe top 6 NHL potential, I think the Canadiens do win this deal. But I think the amount of stuff they had to give up makes me wonder that maybe eventually the Avalanche could be winners of this deal. So definitely, I think this is a really good deal for both sides. For the Avalanche, they get 2 picks and a young prospect, and I do wonder if they maybe move one of those first-round picks to try and improve their team even more. I do wonder if that's a possibility. As for Fairbrother, he's a solid defensive prospect who I think in time could be a good third-pair defenseman, who I think was never going to get very much of a role on the Canadiens roster, so moving him was not overly important for the Canadiens. As for the Canadiens, getting Newhook, who I think could be a third-line center next year, and maybe eventually a solid second-line center, is a pretty good deal for the Habs. And I think while they were not able to most likely get Pierre-Luc Dubois, I think this trade is a really good one for the Habs. So definitely, let me know down in the comments what you think. Montreal getting Newhook, is that the winner of the trade? Or the Avalanche getting 3 key pieces, including a first-round pick in this year's draft, a second-round pick in this year's draft, and a decent defensive prospect for giving up Newhook? Are they the winners of this draft? Definitely. Let me know down in the comments. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video, and if you really liked it, remember to subscribe. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so definitely check that out. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. And definitely remember to check out my live video tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. I'm going to give my live opinion on the draft stuff that happens tomorrow, so definitely check that out. Love to see you guys tomorrow. We may have a couple more videos today depending on what happens. There's some talk that Pierre-Luc Dubois could be traded to the Kings in the not-too-distant future. There's some talk that Igor Sharangovich could be moved by the New Jersey Devils. There's also some talk that the Montreal Canadiens may not be done with moves, so there's still a lot of irons in the fire around the NHL right now. So we could see some more trades before tomorrow, but it's also possible that we could see some more things tomorrow. So remember to stay tuned for tomorrow's live video at 4 p.m. Pacific time, and I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.